Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Lusaka, to those that have been traveling for this and for the Digital Trade Forum that starts tomorrow. We are very happy of being here today in this important masterclass that focuses on the implementing the digital trade protocol under the African Continental Free Trade Area. My name is Max Mendez Parra. I am Principal Research Fellow at ODI, and I am the technical lead of the Supporting Investment and Trade in Africa program. Our program has been designed with the aim of supporting the negotiations and the implementation of the AfCFTA. And we are very proud of have been working with the AfCFTA Secretariat since almost 2018 on the program, and also working with many of the member states supporting the negotiations and the implementation, and probably will be able to talk later about this. I would like also to thank the United Kingdom Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, that has been supporting the program ever since, and that is, of course, supporting this particularly this particular masterclass. It has been a pleasure has been working with them, and it shows the commitment of the UK in supporting the negotiations and the implementation of the AfCFTA. I would like also to talk briefly about ODI Global. Many of you might have known about its former name, that is Overseas Development Institute. But also you might know ODI also for the fellows that have been placed in many African and other countries across the world since 1960. ODI is a think tank that focuses on provide evidence-based policy advice on multiple areas, being trade and economic transformation, one of them, and ODI. For ODI, the AfCFTA is right at the core of its activities, basically how it sees AfCFTA as an instrument to support the transformation of the African economies. So without extending further this introduction, I would like to give the floor to our colleague Tokmor Chidere. He is a senior digital trade expert of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And there are probably few people actually that might be able to talk specifically about the digital trade protocol, because probably he might have known the protocol by every single dot and comma in the book. So he can potentially talk very well about the protocol. So talk more, please. I mean, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Max, and good morning to everyone, including our participants online. First of all, we'd like to welcome you all to this masterclass. This masterclass is a part of the AfCFTA Digital Trade Forum that is running from the 8th to the 10th of May. And the main objective of the masterclasses is sort of to prepare the participants to set the tone for the AfCFTA Digital Trade Forum, which is going to make some big announcements, which is going to discuss policy actions that will be undertaken by different member states and the support that we are going to have in the implementation of the protocol on digital trade. And in this regard, I would also want to thank our partner, ODI, for agreeing to host this masterclass, which is focusing specifically on the implementation of the protocol on digital trade and assessing its impact when it's being implemented. This masterclass, we see it as one of the most important discussions that we are going to have during these 2 days of the masterclasses, as some of you will get to understand what the protocol on digital trade is about and how it will be implemented by the governments for the private sector to benefit. For those who are not aware, the protocol on digital trade was adopted in February 2024, and it has 8 annexes, which I will mention briefly. These annexes were adopted in February 2025 by the AU Assembly. So what this means is the legal instrument or the legal architecture of digital trade in Africa is complete. It's quite a comprehensive, very ambitious and progressive legal instrument which seeks to promote the participation of small and medium enterprises, to boost intra-Africa trade, and to ensure that there is harmonization of regulations for cross-border digital transactions. The protocol covers a wide range of topics. First of all, how private sector access markets beyond their domestic jurisdictions, how private sector can take advantage of this 1.4 billion people market with a GDP of 3.4 trillion US dollars. And how the protocol addresses significantly the challenges that businesses face as they do cross-border trade, including the lack of harmonization of regulations. It also addresses issues related to digital infrastructure. It also addresses issues related to trust and security. It addresses issues pertaining to data transfers, how it prohibits the data localization. The annexes focus or they unpack specific details or regulatory policies of the protocol itself, including the rules of origin. And what the rules of origin seeks to achieve is to ensure that the preferential market that has been created by the protocol on digital trade is only beneficial to the African businesses. So it defines platforms, which digital products and which businesses are ought to benefit from this single digital market under the AfCFTA. The second annex focuses on digital identities, how digital identities need to be established and accorded to natural persons and businesses, and to serve different purposes, including mobility of people across the borders, including interoperability and enhancing trust and security in the online environment. The third annex focuses on the cross-border digital payments. How do we facilitate or how do we establish affordable, inclusive, and safe cross-border digital payments and interoperability of all the digital payment platforms that exist, either at the national level, continental level, and regional level? And fundamentally, how do we ensure that these cross-border digital payment systems or ecosystem is safe and secure? Or how do we tackle issues related to cybersecurity, anti-money laundering, illicit financial flows? The fourth annex focuses on cross-border data transfers, which is how do we enable cross-border data transfers, especially taking into account the fact that digital trade to happen, data has to move. But again, I'll emphasize cross-border data transfers doesn't mean there's no accountability or there's no need to enhance or to ensure the protection of personal data. As a business, you're allowed to transfer data. You're allowed to make sure that the transactions are not restricted by the data transfers, but there's still an obligation to make sure that there's protection of personal data. So it creates a very comprehensive legal framework to govern cross-border data transfers across the continent. The fifth annex focuses on the legitimate public reasons for disclosing source code. The core obligation is state parties should not request the transfer or access to your source code, but there are certain circumstances with the whereby source code may be requested for security reasons, for legitimate public policy objectives. So this annex sort of frames a legal framework that governs how in those circumstances source code will be disclosed and what will be the obligations of the government entity that is requesting access to source code, such that it balances between private and public interest, the public interest of the government, the private interest of the business whose source code has been requested. The sixth annex focuses on online safety and security. And what this annex is meant to do or seeks to achieve is to ensure that the digital single market or this digital environment is safe and secure for both businesses and consumers. Online consumer protection, cyber security, protection of data, and so forth, including the responsibilities of multi-stakeholder approach to ensure online safety and security. The seventh annex is on emerging technologies. How should we take advantage of emerging and advanced technologies in digital trade? So what it simply does is it promotes the deployment, the adoption of emerging technologies to enhance business operations, to enhance digital trade, cross-border trade, including artificial intelligence, computing, cloud computing, and many other emerging technologies. But these technologies ought to be deployed and adopted or used in a safe and responsible manner. And it includes different provisions on how do we promote the development of such technologies, how governments should adopt measures to promote emerging technologies, how regulatory sandboxes ought to be established at the continental level, regional level, to allow sharing of resources and the testing of these technologies before they are deployed in this AfCFTA digital market. Lastly, the annex on financial technology focuses on promoting the growth and advancement of financial technology and how financial technology regulations in relation to registration, in relation to in relation to registration and their promotion ought to be harmonized across all jurisdictions. Also, how license passporting ought to be implemented such that registration in one country should be accepted in other countries. So this, in a nutshell, is what this legal instrument is about. As you can see, it covers quite broad range of topics, even topics that you don't normally see in free trade agreements. But this approach was deliberate. Why? Because we did not want to come up with an instrument that only focuses on mercantile related aspects without addressing other concerns that might hinder the growth of digital trade within the continent. Now that the implementation, the instrument is in place, the next step is to focus on the implementation, which I feel this masterclass is well positioned to discuss about the implementation, how we ought to implement. At the core of this legal instrument is about enhancing digital governance, where regulations ought to be harmonized across the continent, where governments are required to put certain regulations and measures to enable digital trade. So it's not about regulating itself, it's about enabling digital trade across the continent, I believe you do have very experienced experts on the panel today who are going to share their insights, and you hear some of the work that is being done by ODI in different member states and how they are going about in terms of ensuring that this protocol is being implemented, and the implementation plan or program that is being done by ODI, it is aligned to our vision at the AfCFTA on how this protocol ought to be implemented. I don't want to take much of your time. These are just remarks to set the scene and the tone of the session. But I wish you all the best, and I hope you learn much. And I invite you to, this is not the end of the program. This is the beginning of the program. We have other masterclasses going on in the afternoon today, and tomorrow we'll start with our main program and do register online so that you do not have to queue tomorrow for on-site registration. And please join all the other sessions tomorrow. Wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Togmore, and thank you for providing that summary of a very complex but comprehensive digital trade protocol that is extremely innovative and definitely something that is what Africa and the African governments, the countries definitely need actually to boost the digital economy in Africa. We're going to start now a bit with the properly with the masterclass. Before actually going into the panel discussion and the dynamics that I'm going to explain about how this is going to be organized, I would like to invite my colleague, Prachi Agarwal. She is a research fellow at ODI. She works on trade policy, and she specializes particularly on women in trade in Africa, but definitely across the world, and that she has been very involved in in all the digital trade work that has been done at ODI, supporting the countries, the negotiations and the implementation of the digital trade protocol. I think that the initial discussion is going just to set some of the concepts, but particularly what are basically the 13-point implementation plan for the digital trade protocol. This is something that we have developed an ODI based on our interaction with some of the member states, particularly in supporting and in the identifying what needs to be done to implementing the digital trade protocol. So, Prachi, the floor is yours.
Hello? Okay, sorry. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. As Max said, at ODI Global, we've been developing an assessment framework to understand how the digital trade protocol can work for you. There are multiple ways of assessing. Sorry, give me 1 second. I apologize. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. There was a technical issue. Yeah, as I was saying, so ODI Global has been developing a framework, assessment framework to understand how the digital trade protocol can work for member countries. And the assessment essentially includes how to measure the impact of the digital trade protocol. Because if we want member countries to implement the protocol, we have to give them evidence to support that this is going to benefit them in multiple ways. So how do we measure the impact of digital trade? I mean, there are several ways of doing that. And as everyone can see on the screen as well, we have divided that into three main impact channels. The first is macroeconomics. How do we measure it? Digital trade is going to increase the growth rate of GDP or GDP per capita. It's intended to increase FDI into the country, leading to higher employment, not just in digital jobs or sectors that are involved in digital trade, but also auxiliary sectors that are supportive of the digital trade or a digital economy of a country. It is likely to enhance labor productivity because of new tools and new emerging technology that is going to be available and ready to be used by member countries, the digital trade protocol. And naturally, the biggest aim, as well as the impact that would be seen, would be increase in exports, digital exports, but overall exports because of digitalization of the economy and trade processes. So that is something on a very broad sense in what is measurable but not always easily seen. If we break it down and we see other impacts that are going to happen via the digitalization channel, one thing is there's going to be an increase in digital infrastructure. And what does that mean? That can be increase in broadband connectivity, can be an increase, measurable increase in the number of users of mobile services, mobile internet penetration rate, the amount of or the number of data centers that are available, the speed of broadband available in your country or mobile data. Everything, all of those are measurable statistics that come under digital infrastructure. What is second? What is the time that is taken to pass customs procedures? So when you do digitalization of customs procedures, exporters and importers are able to pass through the customs regime much faster. There's less paperwork, less time is being spent. There are less bureaucratic or red tape processes that stop or that affect customs procedures. Moving on, the one main thing that the digital trade protocol is hoping to do is reduce transaction costs, which are transaction costs for digital payments. So at the moment, if one country, say Nigeria, we have panelists from Nigeria here today. So if one country like Nigeria is trying to send money to another country, even Togo, which is in the same region, it takes many days, sometimes weeks, to send that money across for payment of exports or imports. In addition to that, a lot of banks, for example, charge very high transaction costs. And I'm sure all of you are already aware of this problem when you're trying to sell digital payments across Africa. And this is just within the region. The issues are more persistent when you grow across the continent. Each country obviously has domestic regulatory frameworks in place, whether that's for financial services or for insurance or for other digital services that are being provided. And these regulations are not necessarily designed to be restrictive in nature, but they tend to be restrictive. And because you need to comply with these regulatory processes in each country, and they may differ across country. So this leads to something called a compliance cost. And the digitalization and digital trade protocol is going to reduce this transaction cost and the compliance cost. Obviously, one noticeable change will be a growth in e-commerce sector. What do I mean by that? Measurable impact would be an increase in number of users of e-commerce platforms. There'll be more sellers and buyers. There'll be more digital transactions taking place over e-commerce platforms. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity can be measured in the way of how many attacks were happening in real time over a period of time, whether over a week or a month, how many were stopped, what is the reduction rate that you can see in the number of attacks happening online or fraud cases. Emerging tech is also something which is not always measurable, but in this case, we're talking about what is the use of AI, what are the number of patents that are available or being asked or requested by a member state. All of these can be measured, and this is meant to be a direct implication of digitalization of an economy. Even beyond this, there is something more that can happen to an economy, not just economically, but socially. So we are looking at equitable and a sustainable impact of the digital trade protocol. What do we mean by that? One, we are hoping to reduce the digital divide, that is the number of individuals that have access to internet, to online services. And this differs across not just gender, but socioeconomic groups, vulnerable groups, even where you are living, if you're in an urban area or a rural area. So that divide is likely to go down, and that is directly measurable as well. Other things that we can measure are the number of MSMEs that are engaged in digital trade. What is the level or the access of finance, women-owned businesses or youth-owned businesses? How do we measure that? Perhaps through the share of loans that are going to women-owned businesses or youth-owned businesses in by banking or non-banking financial sector. Other things include, from the sustainable side, e-waste generation, carbon emissions, and reduction in paper usage. I think that is the most measurable one that I know of, that you can actually track how much paper you were using before and after, and that impact itself should be something that is very sustainable, and that is something we should be aspiring to do, the digital trade protocol. So putting all of these things together, we try to do something a little bit more simplistic. Our impact assessment doesn't include all of those indicators I just mentioned, but a more macroeconomic perspective. We devised the assessment framework, which is based primarily on a lot of data that is available in literature on what the impact will be of the implementation of the AfCFTA Digital Trade Protocol on member states. We also included a scenario where the digital trade protocol implementation is likely to increase digital penetration in each of the member states, and how these two things together are going to impact GDP, employment, and exports. So we have numbers for, as you can see in the table, we have numbers for the continent as a whole. GDP is likely to increase by about 12% per annum by the implementation of the digital trade protocol. Employment to about 6 to 7 million across the continent. This obviously varies. This is a very averaged value, so not every country is going to see 6 to 7 million. Some countries are going to see much more. For example, we see that Cameroon and Nigeria are likely to experience massive increases in employment because of the digital protocol. But on an average for Africa, it's about 7 to 8 million. And exports are likely to increase about on an average of 18%, ranging from 15 to 21%, depending on what steps member states are able to take through the implementation and after that. We did, at ODI Global, we also did multiple case studies, and this particular masterclass is based on these case studies. Some of them include Cameroon, Ghana, Namibia, and Nigeria. And as you can see, the numbers are very varied across these countries. And this depends not just on the size of the country, but what percentage of GDP is right now dependent on digital trade, what kind of employment statistics do we see in each of the countries, and how is digital trade integrated in the total exports of the country. Yeah, so as you see, the impact is very varied, but these are all very positive statistics, and we are hoping that most of it is realized as we go ahead. My colleague Max mentioned an implementation plan that ODI has also come up with. And as you can see on the leaflets that you have, people in the room, on page 2, as well as online, you'll be able to see that we've come up with a 13-point implementation plan. I'm just going to break it down for you very quickly. Step number one, map existing policies and actors. Who is participating at the moment, what policies exist in your country. And this implementation plan can be used by every member country who's trying to implement the digital trade protocol. So yeah, first, map the existing policies and actors. Second, conduct an in-depth review of the digital trade protocol. What we are trying to say is don't rely on external, not just on external findings of what digital trade protocol can do for you, but conduct an in-country assessment of what the digital trade protocol provision annexures look like and how they are useful for your country. So identify key standards and key protocols within the agreement. The central thing is conducting a gap analysis, and this means a self-assessment of gap from the gap between what exists in the digital trade protocol provisions and what policies exist in your country. So whatever is the gap in terms of what do we need to do, what do we need to do, that is something that needs to be analyzed by each member state individually. And the important bit is that all of these gaps need to be classified temporally. What do I mean by that? I mean that each country must identify a priority, whether that priority is for short-term, medium-term, or long-term. Not everything can be done immediately, and not everything will be implemented in 5 to 10 years. Each of the priorities and gaps need to be broken down, and I think that will be different across each country. So we have to be very mindful of the kind of priorities we're setting, because we need them to be we need to make sure that they are realistic and to the country's current position and what political, economic, and socioeconomic impact it's going to have on the country. How do we do this? We need to establish interministerial committees. That essentially means cross-institutional coordination, identifying focal points across different ministries, whether that's the Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Communications, ICT, Commerce, whichever variation exists in the member state. This is just an example, but also other ministries that are going to be part of it: Ministry of Women and Youth, Ministry of infrastructure or investment promotion or export promotion. All of them are going to come under this. So it is important to identify how these ministries, government departments can work with each other. Now, apart from the government, one very important stakeholder in all of this is going to be the private sector and the civil societies. So we are engaging with these stakeholders at every step. So the first step would be to raise awareness. What can the digital trade protocol do for you? And that's going to attract a lot of interest from the private sector and the civil society. And it's important to consolidate the feedback we receive from them at every stage by creating working groups so that the protocol can be broken down into smaller working groups and everybody can do what has been assigned or what has been agreed together. Now, moving on to the action side of the implementation plan. This was all the planning phase. The action, what happens next? We identify policies to be implemented through the gap analysis. We create a comprehensive national digital trade strategy, which promotes inter and Africa digital trade, it creates interoperable systems, whether that's in digital payments, regulatory systems, etc., as well as matches provisions across countries, as well as from the digital trade protocol with the national policies. And ODI Global is very proud that we were able to do something to help create the national digital trade strategy for Nigeria very recently. And our panelists from Nigeria will be able to talk about it in the panel discussion that's going to follow this. The next step would be defining an implementation plan. Yes, this is also an implementation plan. I understand the irony of the situation. But what I mean by this implementation plan is setting responsibilities for each ministry, for each department, having specific timelines. When do we want to achieve the next phase? When do we want to meet next? At what interval should we have measurable KPIs? And then finally, we need to set up a monitoring mechanism, define what progress looks like, have an independent tracking agency that's tracking what ministries and governments are doing, how the private sector is being engaged at every step. and ensuring all of this is done with a high level of transparency, where we are able to collect and publish data on a regular basis so that everyone is involved, everybody knows what's happening, it's easy, traceable. And finally, this entire process of the implementation of the Digital Trade Protocol has to continuously adapt to the changing policies, to changing governments, make sure there's continuity across different governments when they come into power, ensuring that implementation is not something that is done once and then forgotten about, and the new government has to be started. So ensuring continuity with new policies is, I think, key to all of this. So thank you very much. And I'm going to give it back to Max. I'll give the floor back to Max, and we're going to start the panel discussion now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Prachi. And I think there are important points that come from that. I think the point of the employment is quite relevant here. By 2050, there will be around 100,000 people joining the labor market in Africa per day. So every day there will be another 100,000 people that would need a job. So clearly the, the digital trade protocol is sort of answering that partially, of course. But I think it sort of marks the importance of it. So now we are entering into the panel discussion that we have structured in basically in four parts. In each of the parts, you will have an opportunity to participate, to comment, to make questions. Also, we are trying to make this very interactive, and going to be a couple of polls. There is one that probably I would like to do right now. So those that are online, that we have quite a few, if they want to do that initial polls, we are just trying to find out where you are coming from, not geographically, but from whether you're coming from the government, whether you're coming from the private sector, academia, support organization, development partner, etc. Would like to understand basically what are the sort of representation that we have in today. So those that are online, if you want to start answering that poll, that would be great. And I will do the same here on the floor. I mentioned that we are going to structure this in 4 parts, where we are going to be addressing some important elements of the digital trade protocol, in particular about the implementation. The first part is going to be mostly about the opportunities that the digital trade protocol brings to Africa. We have been already highlighting some of the macroeconomic impact of it, but we would like probably to go deeper into that. Then we would like to go into the inclusion part of the digital trade protocol, focusing on how it will impact MSMEs, the youth, and particularly women in Africa. Then we are going to be focusing on the challenges. I mean, we have talked about the opportunities. We are going to be talking about the challenges. And our final point, it would be, well, what is the things that we need to do, countries need to do to adopt the digital trade protocol. So in each of these parts, you will have the opportunity of participate, those on the floor, and also online. So maybe for those that are here, I mean, how many are coming from the government? Remember that there is a poll you want to, there is a QR code that you can sort of participate. I mean, we scan that and you can participate in the code, in the poll. I think that the poll is already in the chat box on for those online, so they want to participate. So maybe you want to start basically just to state where you're coming from. In the meantime, before getting the results of that first poll, maybe it would be the time to make proper introductions of the people in the panel, where we have a very qualified panel with a very good representation of geographies as well as institutions. So we had people from government, and we had people from the private sector, from colleague think tanks. So that will be providing a very varied and diverse view. So I'm going to make the first introduction based on how we sat. So on the right, I have Alastair Tempest, who is the CEO of the e-commerce forum of Africa. Then next to him, I have Lola Waranti Ekugo. She's the CEO of AfriBorder. Sat next to me and local, because she's from Zambia. We had Michelle Chivunga. She's the founder and CEO of the Global Policy House. And on my left, we have Salihu Dasuki, who is the lead of on ICT policy at the Office of the Vice President in the federal government of Nigeria. So maybe we can sort of give them first applause. We probably want to repeat the applause. So thank you very much for coming today, for being here today. They're coming from different parts of the continent. So maybe we can look at those poll results. I don't know if they are to be seen on the screen. If not, we can. Okay, I mean, probably not. I mean, if you want to respond us or those online, I mean, the link is there. Otherwise, I mean, we are going to start with the first part of the discussion. As I said, this first part of the discussion, we are going to be focusing on trying to understand what are the sort of the opportunities that the digital trade protocol brings to Africa. And the first person I would like to bring to the discussion is Lola. In particular, I would like to use her expertise to try to understand what are the sort of these opportunities in terms of African transformation. Maybe she can shed some light on how countries can utilize strategically the digital trade protocol, identify some key specific opportunities that it brings, and maybe highlight some of the potential economic benefit, but probably not necessarily focusing on the macroeconomics, but basically going to something that is more concrete for the people of the continent. Lola.
Thank you very much, and good morning. A pleasure to be here. I think the AfCFTA Digital Trade Protocol is a very critical one for the continent. I've worked in digital technology for the past 20 years, and I'm always very excited when I see comprehensive frameworks like this on how we can practically use it. When I think about digital trade, I just want to give this higher context so that as we continue the discussions, it's easier to follow. I think about 5 key things. First, I would say for us to participate in digital trade, 1, you need a digital tool. So you need a mobile phone or something to use. Next thing is you need digital infrastructure. So that's where we're speaking about the internet, payments, digital identity, digital platforms. In Africa at the moment, the penetration for mobile phones is around 50%, which is okay. For internet is about 40%. We're getting there. Then we move on to other things like you need digital skills. So people need to know how to use these platforms and whatnot. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen there. You move into physical infrastructure. For however you're trading digitally, except it's for services, you would need to transfer the goods. So we still need to look at the physical infrastructure involved. And lastly, I would say the policies, because of course, policies drive everything. I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think countries need to be very strategic about how they utilize the protocol. One of the things we've seen so far across African countries as we've sort of driven the digital trade protocol conversations is really around capacity building. Finding out that we need a clearer understanding of what the digital trade protocol is at a national level, sub-national level, to understand how they can actually implement it and what it actually means to them. And I think this implementation plan is critical because it's clear, and also the impact, so people can see how it's going to affect them on a day-to-day basis. Another item I think is really important when we think about the implementation is really about identifying what it is that as a country you want to potentially export and where you want to export it to. And I know it sounds really basic, but I tell you, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be happen there. I speak, for instance, we know that Kenya has flowers as one of their major exports, and they export it to Europe. It's, I think, the biggest exporter, actually. I take you back to Nigeria. When you want to import flowers, you actually go to Europe, Amsterdam, to get it. This is the very round, I would say, we're going through. It's important to know that Nigeria does utilize a lot of flowers for Valentine's Day and many of those things. So how can we potentially target specific countries so that we know where we want to send our goods to, essentially? Another item to look at is, of course, we understand that there are loads of policies and we need to localize those policies. Dr. Tokma has spoken about, but I think there needs to be work there on each country on how to localize that as well. And then I think when we're thinking about the implementation as a whole, I think, you know, we're talking about the AfCFTA, 54 countries, it's huge. But I think that we need to focus on how we can implement in smaller patches. So utilize things like the regional economic communities, like the EAC, ECOWAS, even along the corridors like Lagos, Abidjan. We can sort of pilot and start to, you know, trade digitally using these platforms because I think it's smaller and we can see results very quickly. I will give a quick example of the EAC, for instance. We know PAPS, the payment settlement system, that's looking at the whole 54 countries, but the EAC also have a system which they're working on because at the end of the day, there's going to be variety and you can potentially even integrate eventually. So I think we need to look at things in smaller pockets as well. Quickly, I'll give an example as well around something that Trademark Africa worked on, which is called the Regional Electronic Cargo Tracking System. And this is essentially tracking goods that are coming from Kenya, Mombasa, all the way to Entebbe in Uganda. It's basically a seamless flow. Goods, I believe, were for you to transfer goods all the way in the past, it would take about 21 days. But when that was implemented, it started taking about 4 to 5 days. And this is the power of impact that we're speaking about. Because then you could easily track your cargo. I saw it myself at the Kenya Revenue Authorities. You could see your cargo, you could see where it's going, where it is. If it deviates, it's easy to pass through. And I think if we can think about little ways to pilot these things across countries, I think it will go a long way because eventually you can scale these items. I'll quickly talk about some of the I know time is short, but in terms of key opportunities, maybe I'll just use 2 minutes to talk about that. And I think, of course, we've mentioned market access, huge. The 1.4 billion market of Africa. There's a statistics from AFDB that says that most of the African business are MSMEs, about 90%, but only about 17% are actually trading internationally. Look at the opportunity there. We've spoken about jobs, job creation. Africa is the most youthful population in the world. Zambia, Uganda have some of the youngest people in the world. Imagine the opportunity that that would bring when you think about the whole value chain creation of digital platforms, cybersecurity, logistics, the amounts of jobs that that could potentially create. I don't want to take too long, but I'm sure I would have other opportunities to speak more, but I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lola. And yes, I think that the point that you have raised about the opportunity specific on market access and that big market, I said about basically the challenge of creating 100,000 jobs a day, but at the end, actually, there is that opportunity that is that 1.4 billion people actually at the same time. I would like also to now invite Michelle to also basically share her insights about the opportunities of the digital trade protocol, and particularly in relation to the regional integration that the digital trade protocol brings. I mean, the AfCFTA is the big regional integration instrument, but within the AfCFTA is a powerful, the digital trade protocol is a particular powerful tool. So I would like basically you can comment on that and also comment about some of the broader economic implications of the protocol.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Max. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be home. Very excited to be back. I've been coming to Lusaka for a while. This is home for me. I come from Zambia, as Max was saying. Some really important points, I think, also picking up on what Lola was saying. In terms of, the impact of the protocol, especially for regional integration, I think is absolutely transformational for Africa. And what do I mean by that? As African nations, we have done very little with each other. Very little with each other. We do a lot externally, right, in terms of trade, but we have very little, I think 15, 16% in terms of intra-African trades. Again, some of the barriers that the digital trade protocol is really going to address that, which basically means we're able to start to do business with one another. So I'm talking from a Nigeria to a Kenya to a Zambia to a South Africa to a Lesotho. We're able to actually start to trade with each other in an environment where we have very clear rules and regulation. And that is what the protocol brings. Second point, we are living in a digital world, whether we like it or not. We have, transitioned into a digital economy at the end of the day. And really, Africa is, for me, from what I've seen over the years, and I've been in the digital ecosystem, for quite some time, 15 years plus. And what I have seen, in terms of that transition is actually Africa is actually leading in a lot of the digital areas, whether it's mobile money penetration, sort of mobile usage. We are actually leading the world, and the world is actually looking towards Africa and saying, okay, how did that M-Pesa stuff come about, right? How are we doing with mobile money exchange? So I think we need to kind of take that and elevate that and move that forward in terms of helping us to actually start to trade and do business with one another. Hence boosting regional integration and also boosting what we call industrialization, which is critical for the African continent. I'm sure most of you have been watching the news and you've seen what is going on geopolitically around the world. There's a lot of change, right? A lot of economies are coming in, new superpowers are kind of emerging. And of course, there's discussion around the trade tariffs and the trade wars that we're starting to see. But there's one continent I feel is actually in a very, very strong position, in a position they can actually leverage and lead the world, and that is Africa. The reason you've heard from Lola, the youthful population, the opportunity to create digital platform, the opportunity to leverage talent, very, very important. So in terms of regional integration, Max, I think for me, this is the one opportunity, one revolution where the continent can actually leapfrog and has already been doing so and actually can grow economies because we're in such a strong position, whether in terms of, access to talent, and that is youthful talent, access to, new markets that we are creating, access to trade with one another, hence boosting regional integration. But I will also highlight that one of the major concerns, I think, is also around what I think Lola picked up a little bit on it, in terms of, regionally, sub-regionally, we are creating our own systems and platforms. If those systems and platforms do not integrate and interoperate, we're creating more problems for ourselves, and we don't really necessarily need to do that. But the AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, is the one tool that we can use to actually help to boost that regional integration, help to boost our opportunity for us to grow our GDP nationally, but also GDP for the continent. And why is that important? Especially today, why is it important? It's very important today because Africa actually has to go and negotiate on a global platform as a unit rather than individually because of what is happening geopolitically. So the regional integration that we will have, on the continent is fundamental for us to also have a competitive positioning globally, which we really need as things change. Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Michelle. And I think that you said it right. I mean, the digital trade protocol is now becoming, and the AfCFTA in general is now becoming, in the current context, an even more powerful tool, not only in the economics, but actually on the political side. So I think that this is quite another aspect that sometimes is overlooked when we are doing this sort of analysis, but I think that it is critical on that. So I don't know if you have seen the results of the poll. I mean, they were briefly online. I mean, we have a very good representation with a lot of people from the private sector, development partners, academia, civil society. So I think that is very good. There's going to be another poll later, more focused on the challenges that Africa faces. So I'm gonna let you know so you are prepared actually and participate. But I would like to do now is opening briefly to the floor, the physical floor, and also the online floor to make comments or questions to the panelists, or in general some comments about what we have been discussing. I will appreciate if you can be very brief, very concise in your interventions. So if anyone on the floor, I mean, is ready to make a question, or anyone would like here on the panel as well to make an additional clarification or question, the time is now. I'm gonna look here. Is anyone coming online? I mean, as usually this happening, I mean, there are people that are probably typing questions at this certain moment, so I would like to give us some time. But if there's someone here that they would like to comment on the opportunities that the digital trade protocol brings to Africa and maybe to specific countries, this would be the time to look at, to talk about. Or maybe, I don't know, Lola, if you want to extend a bit, that you at some point you said about you have a few other things to say, maybe I can give you a few minutes to comment.
Yes, that's fine. I can do that. So I'll just go back to the point around jobs and the digital landscape and how that's changing so fast. Let me say 30 years ago, something around that, you wouldn't hear about I'm a social media influencer, or I'm digital marketing wasn't a big deal, right? Because social media platforms were just being created. Instagram, they weren't quite there. I think it started with, was it High Five or something like that? The point is, the landscape is evolving. With the digital trade protocol, there's even opportunities perhaps that we've not even seen, new jobs that don't even exist, which will potentially be created. So I think that's something really important to highlight. Another thing that I think I've seen as well from just the impact of digital technologies as well is on revenues. And this is even for the government. I was on a panel, I think it was last year, and one of the panelists was from the KRA, Kenya Revenue Authorities. And he was basically one of the key people who was really saying, look, we need to implement digital. Digital trade is critical. And that's because of the impact they've seen on revenue. When you implement things like digital platforms, it gives a bit more visibility. We all know that majority of the trade happening in Africa is informal. If I'm right, it's maybe about 60% or so that's informal trade. Digital trade essentially will formalize some of those processes, give visibility. You can see what people are trading. You can even use that essentially to help drive other businesses or, essentially for your economy. So I think that there's so much potential there for boosting revenue, jobs. I think GDP growth. We've talked about that. Should I stop or keep going? Because I could.
No. Thank you very much, Lola. In fact, actually, I have a question that is, I think, because you talked about earlier, that maybe you can briefly answer is, they have been asked about that most countries in Africa produce similar goods, how they can trade actually if they are producing those similar goods. Maybe because you at your earlier intervention actually you mentioned about identifying your export opportunities. What would be your short answer to it?
I mean, I think while there's similar goods, there's also huge diversification of goods as well. I think maybe we're also thinking more about raw materials, which is why we're saying similar. But when you think about, for instance, I have this thing, if anyone from Rwanda is here, it's called akabanga, right? Akabanga is largely from Rwanda. Yes, we all make chili. But specifically akabanga is huge. I have it in my handbag. I take it wherever I go. That is an independent, that is largely for Rwanda. Fashion, I'll go. The creative sector. I think Nigeria is doing fantastic in terms of its clothes and attires. Yes, we're making, yes, you see what I mean? In terms of, when we there's so many variations potentially of these raw materials or goods within Africa. Some countries also produce more than others. I brought shea butter from Nigeria and I took it to Kenya. And my colleagues there were extremely happy because sometimes you think that we're all producing the same goods, but when you look at West Africa, East Africa, South Africa, to be honest, there's so much variety within. So I think and that's why I made the point about identifying what those things are. That work needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions online. I don't have any on the floor. I will. There's someone there, but I have a questions.
Max, can I just add what Lola said? I think one of the I'm very sad that the Trade Observatory, which was proposed, has not gone through. And I do hope that the African Free Trade Area Secretariat will push that, because I think that's very important. That is where the identification of different products will come out. And I think it's very, very important that I'm doing a project at the moment trying to encourage more exports from South Africa. And that identification of where the markets are, whether they're in Africa or outside Africa, are incredibly important for e-commerce, which is what I represent. Thanks.
Thank you, Alistair. I think I have a question on the floor. I have a lot, so please maybe if you can give me 1 second. I am receiving a lot of questions. Some of them probably we're going to be discussing the next second, so I'm not going to go through them. Some related to women, some related to challenges. They're going to be a specific block about challenges. So maybe if we can focus up something on the opportunities that we have been discussed. Maybe, gentlemen, if you want to now comment.
I just wanted to draw attention to his question, but then I'll take the opportunity to just say, on the question, issue of where people feel like Africa is very agrarian, so all of our products are homogeneous. I wanted to give the example of a typical marketplace in Africa. You can go buy tomatoes and there's like 10 tomato sellers, but because of the sheer volume of consumption, everyone gets a piece of the pie. And I feel like that's the kind of message we should be pushing. That even though we are homogeneous in the kind of products we do, there's still a big market for all the types of products that we produce. And like she said, there's a very large variation we don't see that's in the market. So it's good enough for us. Thank you. Sorry, my name is Edem Kwame Numaji from Ghana's National AfCFTA Coordination Office. Thank you.
I have one gentleman at the back. Yes.
Good morning to the panelists. Thanks, and these are very insightful conversations. My name is Samson Banda. I'm coming from British High Commission. My question, sorry, and to take it back slightly, I might have missed this, but I'm trying to understand whether the digital trade protocol focuses much more on the trade in, sorry, trade in the digital aspects of the economy, or is it more of just the trade that is driven by the digital technology itself, or it's the actual devices, the trade, the digital devices, as well as the probably the software, the cloud computing, or the is it the AI kind of services? And then the other question, I was wondering whether the panelists can also comment on probably the status of Zambia in implementing the digital trade protocol in comparison probably to other countries as well, because I gather that the implementation has been at different levels with other countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, maybe I can give you the answer to the question.
Sure, thank you. Great questions. I will answer the second one on Zambia because we've been doing quite a bit actually on the Zambian side. But in terms of what we mean on digital trade, right? Digital trade is basically where you're trading online. But of course, there's the physical element as well in terms of getting those goods or services, delivered. When you think about, and it combines everything you talked about. So you're leveraging digital technologies basically to be able to deliver on digital trade. But in order for you to deliver digital trade, we also have to be able to connect onto the digital economy. And so everything you've heard around, are we able to get access to the internet? Are we able to have affordable data in order for me to participate in the digital economy so I can do digital trade? Is very, very important. And then, of course, the technologies, if you think of the technologies like blockchain, AI, cybersecurity, these are basically enablers. Think of them as tools you can use so that you can do that digital trade. And that digital trade is also done very cost effectively, very efficiently, right? It helps you to do things a lot faster, a bit more innovatively. Now, at the end of the day, most of this stuff that we're talking about, the underlining fundamental ingredient, really what you need to be able to deliver digital trade is data, right? Have you got access to data? Have you got access to information? Have you got, can you use that data, that information to make you understand certain decisions, make you, come up with new tools and new products as well. So the whole digital trade ecosystem does not just refer only to e-commerce. No, it goes beyond just e-commerce. E-commerce is one area. We're talking about digital, goods and services. Sometimes we forget about the services. Services also, you can deliver digital services as well online. So it's a combination of all those things into one. But then you're using the technologies or digital technologies to do those things a little bit faster and to access more and more markets, which is very, very important. Now, in terms of your second question, in terms of where countries are at, we have worked with ODA as well to assess, what is happening in different countries. Ghana was one of the countries we looked at. And we have a very comprehensive study that we've done on Ghana, which was fascinating. I found it very informative. Because in Ghana, you notice that Ghana is very, very innovative, especially when it comes to fintech. And they actually way ahead in terms of policies and regulation, actually have policies and regulation. But it's important those policies and regulations are harmonized because you can't have 20 different policies and rules and regulations, right? And even the different departments, government departments are not talking to one another, right? It's important that they're talking to one another, you harmonize the policies and regulations, and your systems are able to speak to one another. So interoperability is very, very important, right? Now, when we go to different countries, we also have to, like I said in the beginning, we are trying to encourage intra-African trade. So us trading with each other, the flower example you were given, why can't we, Kenya, export flowers to Nigeria, right? Why can't we in Zambia send our maize to, I don't know, Togo? Why can't we in Zambia send, I had SAMP this morning, I was so happy because I haven't had SAMP for a long time. So why can't we export what we have, right, as countries to other countries? So in terms of the level of digital trade and where we're at, countries are at different levels. right? Zambia, we just finished with Minister Mutati writing the AI strategy for the country. And we have an artificial intelligence strategy, very innovative. One I've not even seen in Western economies. But Zambia has the AI strategy. So do other countries, Nigeria, South Africa. But those AI strategies, how are they integrated? How are they talking to one another? Do we have interoperability even in terms of AI strategies that we have and how we're going to interoperate with each other on AI, for example? Very, very important that we look at. Nigeria, and I'll just give a couple more other examples. Nigeria, Minister Busun has been doing amazing work when it comes to helping to build talent. We talked about jobs and opportunities for young people and the 100,000 you're talking about daily. I think Minister Busun, you should talk to Minister Busun because what he's doing is preparing for those 100,000 because he's preparing the young talent, right? 3 million Nigerians training on artificial intelligence, cutting edge areas, right? Areas that will matter in the future. So we can't keep on, as much as my mom, my dad, they all keep saying to me, even today, they said, but do you not want to be a doctor? I'm like, no, mom, I'm okay. I'm okay in AI. I love it. I love what I'm doing. So the jobs of the future, you know, is going to change. We have to take that into context, right? The world we're living in now is going to be slightly different in 10, 15 years' time. America, I've just come from America. They've just signed an executive order. Trump has signed an executive order on AI, right? AI education, because there's signals there that are telling you the world is shifting and it's changing. I think it's very important for all of us to look and say, in our economies, what are we doing that is beneficial for our countries? Yes, for Nigeria, for Zambia, for Kenya, but what is also beneficial for our continent together, right? How do we work together? So if we need more funding, we need more investment, how can we pull together and get that funding investment so we don't leave Lesotho or, you know, the smaller ones, the Swatini, right, without access to connectivity or internet or infrastructure, everything you've heard today, because there's not enough funding. I think that's very important.
Thank you very much. And I have to move to the next block, but there was a very interesting question, and I would like the panelists to answer it in 2 words. Basically, what are the low-hanging fruits of the digital trade protocol? What are the things that can be easily achieved? So can you answer that in 2 words? This is to everyone, so Alastair. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's customs facilitation is extremely important within digital. And the other thing is exactly what Michelle was talking about, looking at policies and trying to make sure that those policies are the same. And I'll give you a very good example, very quickly, very good example of that. The OECD is doing something on AI. Other countries are doing things without any reference to that. That's daft, quite frankly. Sorry.
Thank you. 2 words.
I think he's already picked up on what I would say. I would have said a harmonization of policies as well. And I would say regions, looking at it in smaller buckets. So your neighboring country, how you can trade, how you can easily move between them. So your corridors, your RECs, that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like now to move to the next block. I mean, some of the questions that were online, I'm going to pick that up later because they were more related to the other block. So it's not that I am overlooking at them. But this block is specifically about inclusion. So what we would like to discuss now is how is that the implementation of the digital trade protocol is going to deliver for specific productive groups such as MSMEs, and then specific groups of the population such as youth and women. There is a specific protocol in the AfCFTA, that is a women and youth protocol in trade. But I think that the digital trade protocol in itself can deliver a lot actually for those groups. And I would like to hear, and we would like to hear more from the panelist. I mean, and I would like to bring now Alastair to basically comment about specifically some of the critical provisions of the digital trade protocol in relation for MSMEs, and maybe outline some of the steps for including some vulnerable groups into in specifically, how the businesses actually dealing with it? What is the perspective of businesses in relation to an inclusive implementation?
Thanks very much indeed, and thank you very much indeed, the ODI, for inviting me. As I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, I work for the e-commerce business. It's not a sector, it's a whole load of different things which have been discussed recently. I mean, just now, logistics, the ability to get online, to do something online digitally. All these things are incredibly important. And I think Lola said only 40% of Africans are so far attached to the internet. And that makes a very big difference. One of the most important things is to try to ensure that small and medium-sized companies, women and youth are included within this whole process. And in fact, they are much better included than perhaps we should think. Meta did a study of Facebook in which they discovered that over 50% of the Facebook marketplace were businesses owned by women. And that women were much better, it was just after COVID, women were much better at pivoting because of COVID than their male counterparts. So let me quickly look at where we are with these two protocols. Max mentioned the Women and Youth in Trade protocol. That was agreed last year. It is going through very quickly. And I think it's going through very quickly because it is much more, as the Americans would say, pre-Trump, it's much more apple pie and motherhood. It is not looking at specific regulations, or very few of them. It's looking at trying to promote women and youth in trade. Let's look back at the Digital Trade Protocol. That lists a whole range of things that member states have to do. I'll just give you a few examples. Electronic authenticity, paperless trading, electronic contract, electronic invoicing, digital payments, encouragement of digital identities. These sorts of things are incredibly important. Why? Because they ease business. And I think that is the principle that the African Free Trade Area Secretariat took, to look at easing business, how to make business much easier. If you have, I run a not-for-profit company, association. If I have to spend half my time working on paper, trying to do this, that, and the other, I will have wasted that time. I can do it much quicker online. And this is the important thing, I think. It is to try to encourage trade by making it much easier to do. There are also rules and regulations on such things as data protection, privacy sometimes known as, consumer protection, which I'm sorry to say I think it's rather light, but never mind, cybercrime and online safety and security. And of course, the annexes that Talkmore listed go much more into that sort of detail. And it creates what is known as the level playing field. And it creates that level playing field, not just in cross-border, so that South Africa can sell to Namibia, Namibia can sell to Zambia, Zambia can sell to Egypt, and know that the rules are more or less the same. But it's also internally as well. National trade benefits too, because that level playing field creates a regulation which is acceptable and easy to do. The Women and Youth Protocol, as I said, is much broader. It calls for harmonization of programs to support women and youth. It calls for the removal of any discrimination that might exist, which would stop women or youth owning and running digital businesses. It encourages more skills and capacity building, which we talked about earlier. And it touches on a number of other protocols which already exist, like intellectual property and investment protocol, both agreed last year. So it leaves the aims, it leaves how to achieve these aims up to the member states or member parties to deal with. I'd just like to take a couple of quick points that I picked out. It promotes women and youth in formal cross-border trade, but it doesn't mention informal trade, which, as Lola said, is extremely important. Don't know why. Well, I do actually, but we won't go into that. It requires member parties or member states to collect and share statistics which are disaggregated by sex and age on small-scale cross-border trade. Very interesting. We in South Africa suffer terribly from a lack of data. If you asked me how much e-commerce was being used in Africa, I would not be able to answer you because no one is collecting that data, and that is a terrible shame because it stops proper investment. And finally, it requires the member states to set up trade focal points to assist women and youth as well. So I think all these things build together to include or to increase inclusion. And that is why they are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. And I think that very important points that you brought, specifically the point of data, basically it's a sort of brace for the first time. Probably we'll continue talking during the rest of the masterclass for the rest, because it's an extremely important aspect there. And I would like now to bring also Salihu Dasuki, that he comes from the government of Nigeria, to actually look into specifically the perspective in Nigeria about how is that the digital trade protocol is sort of geared towards sort of levers for specific groups. And this is quite important because Nigeria has been identified as the digital trade champion by the African Union. So I would like to know basically is what is that the government of Nigeria is doing, and how it's basically approaching the issue of inclusion in digital trade.
Thank you very much, Max. So in 2023, we had a new administration in Nigeria. And one of the key focus of the government was to diversify the economy and move beyond our focus on oil. And one of the key areas is digital trade. And this is in line with the mandate of our Minister of the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, who has been pushing for digital trade. And it's obvious we've started seeing the impact of it on Nigeria. And so what have we done? Last year, with the support of ODI, and again with the guidance of the Federal Ministry of Investment Trade and Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, we've developed a roadmap for digital trade strategy. And the argument was a lot of the agencies were working in silos. So how do we consolidate them? With the guidance again of the ministry and the Office of the Vice President, we've been able to coordinate all the agencies in order to see how we can develop this strategy. And beyond also the strategy, which we've already developed right now, it's online for you to read. One of the key priorities of the strategy also is on digital inclusion, which is on women and youths. And that's also a key priority of the government, and that's also a key priority of the minister. And as well, I'm sure you all know that our minister is a woman. So one of the key areas is to ensure that this digital trade protocol ensures that the beneficiaries of it are both women and youths. And so we've done a bit of research. We've identified key areas that we would include to support women. And a lot of them are now very, very obvious. And one of the key visions of the government is to achieve the $23 trillion economy by 2020. And that's very, very impossible without also ensuring that women are put in the forefront of this digital trade protocol. And so there are a lot of opportunities out there because just like Lola says, the women and the youths are the advocates of the informal SMEs sector, and you can't achieve this digital trade without actually looking at this sector in order for Nigeria to tap into the 3.4 trillion GDP. So that's a lot of the focus out there. But another aspect that we've looked at with regards to the digital trade strategy, which again is a focus of the government and also the ministry, is the area of business process outsourcing. And as much as we know that India is the space for outsourcing, and most likely South Africa, we believe there's a lot of opportunities for Nigeria as well. We've launched the Outsourcing to Nigeria initiative. And when it comes to also, I mean, I'm not saying Nigeria speaks the best English, but I think it's easier to understand the English that we speak compared to India and compared to South Africa and even compared to Zambia. So, yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity for us to tap with regards to that. Yeah, and that's where we see a potential in terms of what the outsourcing market. And again, just like a focus that we have in which the minister is actually driving, which is our NATEP, our National Talent Export Program. And we're looking at how do we export our talents, our women, our youths into this big market space using digital trade. So these are the areas that we've looked at in terms of inclusion. And lastly, maybe again with regards to data protection, which also the research from the findings from ODI. So we're now strengthening our data protection laws and aligning into the digital trade protocol. So those are a few areas. And just like Michelle talked about, we have the biggest accelerator program, which is a 3MTT, which is a 3 million talent program, because one of the key findings of the report is the lack of capacity, lack of people with the right skills. And just, I think, 2 months ago, if I'm not mistaken, we had a strong collaboration between Minister Dr. Jumoke, which is our Minister of Investment and Trade, and also Minister Boston, which is the Minister of Digital Economy, in the presence of the leadership of the AfCFTA of Ghana, where there was a lot of collaboration to see how this 3MTT can also focus on women. So right now, these are a lot of initiatives we're doing in Nigeria, and that keeps us in the light of not only the giants of Africa, but also the leads with regards to being the digital trade champions. Thank you.
Thank you, Salihu, and very, very important, all the initiatives that were undertaken. And I think the bottom line message here is that inclusion doesn't happen automatically. I mean, basically, the digital trade protocol will not by itself eventually deliver as much as is needed. There are the specific policies women, youth need to be mainstreamed into the strategies of countries. So I would like now briefly to also bring back Michelle to discuss specifically on how is basically women can be, basically in relation to what I just said, women can be empowered actually through digital trade. Specifically, and also how is that basically some barriers that face women need to be addressed.
Thank you, Max, and thank you, Alistair and Salihu, because they've covered the topic on women very well, considering you're not women. So I love that. No, but when it comes to all the women in the room and all the women online, I haven't forgotten you. If you had to be asked, what is maybe that's one of your polls for future, what is your biggest barrier? I can probably guess that most of you will probably say, no, it's not that we're short of ideas. It's not that we're not entrepreneurs. It's not that we are, we can't multitask. It's not that we can't, do business. It's not that those are not the issues, right? Many women I've met are the most innovative, most they multitask. They do 5 jobs at the same time. They look after the household, they look after the kids, and the kids includes the big kids, if you know what I mean. So at the end of the day, women are juggling everything, right? So for me, I think, you know, how do we empower women? I think women are actually already empowered. They're already empowered, but I think there are a number of barriers that stop them from scaling to the next level. And some of those barriers include things like access to capital. Access to finance is the number one. When I speak to women, it's not just women in Africa, it's not just women in Europe, it's not just women in Asia, because I've been all those places. The one thing that does come up time and time again is, I don't have access to capital, Michelle. I don't have access to enough money for me to take my store to scale it to grow. I don't have enough money for me to buy more tomatoes from the woman who is selling tomatoes in the market. I want to get a new stand so I can sell more tomatoes. I don't have enough money. The other one is access to information and data. We've talked about data already, right? I need more information about where else can I go and sell my tomatoes so I can sell it maybe higher price. Where else can I go and maybe trade with somebody else in another country? But how do I do that, right? I want to sell my tomatoes and move from Zambia to Kenya to Malawi to Mozambique. I don't know anything about the rules in those countries. Can I do it? Am I allowed? Can I not? Those are the questions that we get a lot from the women. So in terms of how do we empower, the digital trade protocol is one tool that can help empower women because it solves quite a lot of those issues I've pointed out. The other one is also the women and youth protocol, of course, but being really frank and being honest, one thing that we can do is actually provide access to capital and finance. And I'm not talking about huge amounts of capital and finance. $1,000, you know, $2,000, $5,000 can make a huge difference to a small scale SME, a woman-led business. So for me, that is the area that we are, for example, focusing on, you know, creating funds that support women and also supporting women in the digital trade ecosystem. One of my passions is to train 10 million women into the digital trade ecosystem. Very, very important. Because if we don't do the training where we're training women now so they can access more information, they can use the digital technologies. This, I'm talking about the AIs and blockchains and all that to actually make sense to them. So we hear all these buzzwords all the time. Women hear it all the time. But what does it mean for me as a woman? Oh, you mean with this AI-powered application, now I can manage and I have more time for the children? Great. I mean, this blockchain thing, I don't need to know it's blockchain. I don't care. You know, I just wanted to be able to do things a little bit faster, more efficient, so I have time to do other things. So I think it's very important that one, we educate the women, give them access to the tools that they need, provide them access to capital, right? So they can scale and grow their business and then connect the women. So again, digital, right? With the platforms and the social medias, instead of you guys just taking nice pictures on Instagram. We all want to take nice pictures on Instagram. But instead of doing that, guys, connect with one another on the platforms that are there, especially the women. So now you can connect a woman in China who can provide you with your supplies. You connect a woman in Zambia or in Kenya or in Mozambique, and you can start to do business together just on the digital marketplaces or digital platform. Very, very important. So those are some of the things I think that we can use to not empower, power women because they're already empowered.
Thank you, Michelle, and yes, and I think that this is what this is about, specifically giving more tools to women to achieve whatever they want, and at the same time handle more efficiently everything that are already doing. I mean, so actually assisting them. I would like now to bring to the floor specifically about the topic about inclusion. So I'm taking questions online. I have one online already that was brought before. But I think on the floor and the people online, if they want to post some questions, some comments, specifically about the issue on inclusion, as I said, MSMEs, youth, and women, we would like to open the discussion again. Be very, very concise in your intervention. Let me see what I have, because I have already. The question I have, I mean, that was coming from before online, is that whether there is African countries can adopt a sort of a declaration on digital trade rights. And I think that this is probably broader than inclusion, but I think that it is about eventually giving rights. similar to the human rights declaration, but specifically on digital rights, something that addresses some common challenges around infrastructure, but also something that ensures all countries benefit equally from an inclusive economic growth and regional integration, specifically on that. This is just to give credit to Jacqueline Jaffeth, that was the one that made the question. I don't know if anyone want to comment on that briefly on that, whilst we are hearing from others online and on the floor.
I think to a certain degree, we've got the Malibu Convention, which deals with data protection and the cyber security. They are looking at that, and they're looking at maybe updating it. I personally feel that the two subjects should be separated into two conventions, but it could be a much larger convention. And I do feel that there is a much greater need for consumer protection to be built into the whole process. I think the protocol was rather light on consumer protection. So yes, it would be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
So my question is to the Zambian colleague and the Nigerian colleague, mainly drawing from your experience in the strategy development. With regards to inclusion, have there been any framework provisions for accessibility and assistive technology when it comes to persons with disability, and how have you addressed issues like that for PWDs? Thank you.
So we've gone step by step, and currently with regards to people with disabilities, just like what it was already mentioned here, with regards to digital identity specifically, which is an area that Nigeria is really looking into, because without identity, you can't have financial inclusion. You can even have access to the digital space. And one of the key areas with the support of World Bank, which has been launched just recently, and I think the CEO of the National Identity Management Commission will be speaking on Friday on this, which is the launch of ensuring that people with disabilities are properly captured in the digital space with regards to digital identity. So that's one area. And then the second area also, I know that the Nigerian government, particularly NIDA, is also providing digital talent skills for people with disabilities. So one way or the other, the trend and the focus is gaining through there, because there's a lot of focus on women. You know, there's also an argument that we can't keep focusing on the women and excluding even the boys in the future. And then also now we can't keep focusing on them and excluding them. So there's a little bit of trajectory going towards there. Thank you.
Yeah, and from a Zambian perspective, so I don't know how many people in this room know, or those online, that Zambia has actually been selected as an AI champion for Africa by the United Nations, right? So especially around things like AI and mining is something that we're looking at. So on the disabilities, again, I'll go back, because one of the priorities that we want to look at is not necessarily just to support, for example, the gender side. We also want to look at people with special needs and disabilities as well, especially how do we leverage like technologies like AI to create new models that people with disabilities can actually use and use a little bit more efficiently, right? So actually producing products and goods using this technology, so it make it easier for people who with special disabilities, something we're looking at, especially around the AI side with the ministers. The other one is also around making sure that people with disabilities, you're not necessarily kind of looked at as a separate category. This is part and parcel of the whole group, but also consultation in terms of what are the issues for you, right? And making sure even when we're doing the protocol. So I sat on the special task force that was there to write and draft the digital trade protocol. And one of the arguments from colleagues, and there are many colleagues who were part of the process delivering and actually producing that digital trade protocol. And one of the comments that we all unified by was actually we need to ensure that this protocol actually addresses the needs for people with disabilities, especially that in our countries, in all our countries, in Africa, we all have different levels of service availability for people, right? So we wanted a protocol and ensure that that protocol really addresses that in all the different segments. So even when you go to all the different countries, we're talking about, making sure everything is harmonized. This is a good example where we're saying in all countries, regardless of whether you're in Nigeria, big Nigeria, or you're small Lesotho or Eswatini, we have to have common agreement on certain areas. And this is one of the areas that we spent many, trust me, many months and nights sort of arguing about how do we ensure that there's that inclusivity of everybody, not just the gender, not just the youth, not just everybody, right, for all our countries. And I think this is where, there's one common thread that we need to look at and ensure that is actually taken into consideration, because we did that as we wrote the protocol.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I have a final question for probably Alistair, but maybe you can also answer as well. That is in relation to how to include informal MSMEs to the digital trade. So this is a question to any of you. Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, I wanted to make a quick comment just around women and inclusion. And I think we found that a lot of times you're solving issues, but you don't understand the problems. And I think that with women, there's some really specific issues which they're dealing with. One of the key issues that was found out that around the corridors when they're trading is gender-based violence. It's not a straightforward, you want to just trade from, I don't know, between maybe Nigeria and Lome or Uganda and Kenya. And these are key issues that they need to deal with. So there are studies around how they could potentially use digital technologies as well to help solve for some of those issues. I wanted to also state that there were two initiatives that I think perhaps would also be scaled just to sort of help drive this conversation and get it around most of the continent. There's one, it's called the ISOCO platform. I think it was launched around about 3 years ago. In collaboration, Trademark was one of the key implementers for that, and it's for women actually. It's based for women in, I think, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and it's allowing them have access to market information, because you mentioned that of course, this is critical. You need to know what you're selling and, where you can take it to and who's looking for your goods. And I think those are potential platforms that if we can identify, we can, scale. And then there's also the Making Trade Work for Women initiative, and that was launched in, I think it was March, by Global Affairs Canada, and it was for women in West Africa, across 6 West African countries. And it was really capacity building to ensure that people understand how they can trade digitally. So the question, and it was really for informal. The question was around how people how to include. The first thing, and I think we've sort of spoken about that, is really around skills. And I think that is the biggest challenge that we've seen. And we've spoken about that. People need to understand, how, I would say, how to use it and the impact. I think the second thing was really around the impact, not understanding, there's a fear that, okay, if I register my business, then I'm liable to tax, and then I'm liable to so many things. So you find that people, especially informal traders, don't want the formality of actually trading formally. But then if you're able to say that your business now has maybe 5,000 customers, if you register and become formal, you have the potential to scale to 1 million. So I think I'll stop there, but that is, of course, the impact that I think people need to be aware about.
Thank you. Briefly.
Very briefly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed for that question. I think it's incredibly important. What's been brought to our attention is the fact that WhatsApp is being used cross-border. People get an order from a trader in another country saying we need plastic bags or whatever it happens to be, and they are carried across the border. That is already e-commerce. It's the basic e-commerce. Doesn't include payments yet, although WhatsApp may include payments soon. I think the real problem, and it has been brought up so many different times is the fact that informal traders are shy of being identified by the tax. And that is the truth. So they don't wish to ensure that they're part of a tax base. And if you look at informal traders, let's say what are called tuck shops in some countries, they can be extremely large in terms of turnover. I've come across one that was turning over something in the region of $20,000 profit a month. So, you know, you have to be therefore very vigilant of that tax issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I need now to move to the next part that is now dealing with challenges. For that, we have a poll. So there is, for those that are here on the floor, you might have a paper with a QR code that you should available to actually to participate in this poll. And those online, you should have a link actually that will allow you to participate on the poll that particularly is trying to understand what are the challenges for digital trade in Africa, whether we are talking about this is an issue of infrastructure, whether it's an issue of trust that had been mentioned in many of the questions, and I will come back to that in a few minutes. Whether it's an issue, well, consumer protection that is there, whether there is cybersecurity, whether it's policy, whether, I mean, there is a wide range of issues. So what is the most critical for the, basically you, for the audience, basically, in terms of digital trade, I mean, the challenge for digital trade in Africa. But now I would like now to come back to Salihu to show or to basically tell us, basically specific in the case of Nigeria, what are the sort of the policy gaps and how is Nigeria sort of address them. And in that process, basically sort of identify what are the specific challenges that Nigeria is facing in terms of implementation, and maybe share what, as I said, what is Nigeria doing to align itself to the protocol.
Thank you for this. So as noted earlier, what the Nigerian government is doing, particularly with the Office of the Vice President, what we are is we're a coordinating body. And just like I mentioned earlier on, we have a lot of agencies in Nigeria that were working in silos on digital trade. And with the support of ODI last year, and that's the program we've been doing, we've been able to bring all these agencies into one single house and develop this strategy in ensuring the harmonization of whatever these various agencies have been doing. But more importantly, also with regards to this digital trade protocol, we noticed that it was discussed at the executive level, at the international level. But what we find out is in Nigeria, we have different states. I'm not sure how it is in Zambia, but in Nigeria, we have different states, and we found out that we need to trickle down this conversation in digital trade down to the states level. And recently also with the support of ODI, what we've done is we've brought all the states together, all the commissioners of trade and innovation, and we've created capacity on what this digital trade protocol is. How can you take it up from out there at the executive level and domesticate them at the local level? So there's also the area of awareness. And then one of the key issues has always been digital infrastructure, access to internet and broadband. We currently have that challenges in Nigeria, but something that's coming very big in the third quarter of the year, which is Nigeria is launching the $2 billion broadband access by the Ministry of Digital Economy in order to achieve our broadband policy of 2025. The what again what other challenges have we been doing? We've actually just developed our e-commerce policy, and while the agency were developing their e-commerce policy, it has also been aligned with the digital trade strategy that was developed and supported with ODI. And this is also done to align it with the AfCFTA protocol. And then why again? We've had our different policies, such as the Nigerian Digital Economy Policy, our Startup Act, our E-Commerce Act. These are all policies that have been reviewed, and data protection policy as well. They are all being reviewed and also try to be aligned with the AfCFTA protocol. And then maybe lastly, I'll talk about access to finance. In order for also these youths and women to be able to particularly utilize this digital trade, they need to have access to finance. Most of the countries today are facing challenges with finance, but Nigeria has been trying it. We've recently launched a National Youth Innovation Fund out there so that organizations can utilize this, and small and SMEs. We've also provided grants, and we've continued to provide grants with women, and we've done a lot of stakeholder consultation. And this was also one of the support ODI gave us with private sectors. So we've been trying our best to ensure that we continue to maintain the lead as digital trade champions. So those are the few challenges we've been had, and these are not different from what other African countries are facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Salihu, for highlighting those challenges. I'm very interested also that basically how is that Nigeria is addressing them. We are looking, I mean, you're looking at the screen basically on the poll. I think that we should do better. I mean, counting the people here and online, we should have around 100. We only have 29 people that just fill the poll. So actually, please continue actually trying to identify the challenges. In the meantime, Lola, maybe you can, you have already highlighted some of the examples from the private sector and how governments are dealing to overcome some of these challenges. Maybe you can dig a bit deeper on them. I give you the opportunity there, and then sort of what would be the sort of priority actions in relation to implementation, particularly to address those challenges?
Thank you. I think one of the key things I would say in terms of intervention from government is, it's really around movement of people. So for trade to happen, you have movement of people, goods, services, funds, yes, exactly, capital, and data or information, right? And in terms of movement of people, I feel like that sector, we don't talk about it enough. For me to travel here to Zambia, on an average, it's about 19 hours, really. 21 hours, 22 hours. Easiest was 14 hours by Ethiopian Airlines, really. In terms of visas, Nigerians had to get a visa. And, some non-Africans, not not saying too much, don't even need a visa to come here. I think that exactly, these are, I would even say, low-hanging fruits that potentially could be addressed. We're talking about movement of goods and services. People need to move as well. They need to be able to explore countries. They need to be able to actually move the goods, the truck drivers and all. So I think those are things that I think can easily be potentially looked at. There are huge issues, honestly. I want to come to Zambia more as well. But the journey, honestly, you have to go to another continent sometimes to get here. It's really huge. Another thing I think is really critical, and I think Alistair had touched upon it, is really around streamlining the processes like customs processes. Ensuring that we have things like single windows, digital certificates of origins. I mean, these things, I think it was last year, I visited the Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce. And apparently for you to get a certificate of origin in the past, you actually needed to travel to Addis Ababa to get it. After the implementation of one of these digital origin platforms, it just took hours online. I mean, these are practical things that I think we need to look at. There's also a concept called the one-stop border posts. And we've seen a lot of that around East Africa, and I think we need to bring that more to the rest of the continent. And this is essentially allowing one entry point and one exit point. You're usually sharing the same information to pass through the borders anyway. Why do you need to go through two? And I believe that if I remember correctly, in terms of statistics, it's actually the installation of the one-stop border post. I think there's Nakonde, which is Zambia, Tanzania, and also Tunduma, reduced movement by the time to move by about 70%. I mean, these are huge gains that I think we could potentially explore around the rest of Africa. In terms of policies, we've talked about that as well, but I think that need to ensure we have harmonized policies is critical. I was at, I think it was March, I was in Ghana, and there was this round table with the Ghana Chamber of Commerce. So these are businesses in the private sector. And one of the key challenges that was discussed was really around intellectual property. You know, people want to know that, you know, as they trade, you know, what are the policies? Are the policies going to favor them or not? So I think there needs to be work there in harmonizing and localizing those policies and ensuring that it works for the people that would use them. In terms of tax, I think tax is a huge one. And I think that that's something that the government can also do. Dr. Saliu spoke about business processing outsourcing. And that's a huge potential area, potential service providing services. If we're really trying to grow a sector, then we need to look at tax breaks and tax reliefs to ensure that people can actually easily move, easily trade and come into that area. I'll just quickly run through my key things that I would say are, you know, critical. And if we're going to implement, we should look at that. So priority actions, I would say it's really around establishing these national digital trade committees. And that's just for implementation. I think it's critical that you have all the stakeholders together. Everyone is talking the same language. The ministers that are involved, we're all, you know, driving the same conversation, going in the same direction. Two, I would say is there's a need for collaboration. And I don't think that this digital trade can be achieved really without collaboration. By that, I mean collaboration with the private sector, the government, and international organizations. Some of these key initiatives I've spoken about in terms of one-stop border posts, some of the even PAPs, and whatnot, there's some element of collaboration, international development organizations, private sector government. I think we need to ensure that we do more of that. And lastly, capacity building. I think I can't say that enough. I've facilitated some workshops as well. So I know that, you know, there's a huge need for people to really understand how this works and what it's going to do for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like now to open the floor specifically on these challenges. And also, well, I would like to also comment. I mean, please, I mean, continue coming with your how you think that basically are the challenges. I mean, infrastructure appears that the most critical one, but also we're talking about regulations and skills and trust. And this is something that it was mentioned by some people in the chat, specifically about trust. I think that also, Alastair, you also brought the issue specifically on consumer protection. So this seems to be issues there affecting Africa. So maybe you, those that are here on the floor, and others may want to comment specifically on other issues or some of those that are there. If there is someone that wants to specifically expand a bit the discussion on these issues, please raise your hand. Unfortunately, I have run out of juice in my laptop, so I cannot see basically what's going on the chat box. But I think that this is if this anyone here on the floor, I think I have a lady there that wants to talk. I think it's very yes.
Okay. I wish to appreciate all of you, the presenters in front, because what you are bringing out is actually we are into technology. It needs to be embraced by everyone. I'm an SME or an entrepreneur, we're so much interested in having information coming from worldwide, because we are not just dealing with Zambia, we are dealing with the global world. So in the global world, you find the most cardinal people who lag behind, it is us, the SMEs, including even the men, the youths. If we don't take the information outside there, we'll still lag behind, because you find that there are so many things that are happening up there, which we don't really get down to the bottom of all of us. My encouragement is, everything has already been tabulated. When I look at the PowerPoint, which is there, it is outlined the challenges that we are having. Capacity building, network is one of the key things that we lack. Remember, we have got rural areas where we are coming from, the villages, the farmers are out there. People, they are entrepreneurs in those areas who need this information. So how are you going to encourage the associations, or how are you investing them in taking out this information, which we are learning right now, so that even others can benefit?
Thank you very much. Is there any other question on the floor? Yes.
So mine is less a question and more a contribution on some of the challenge areas. And from the Ghana perspective, one of the things that we've seen have been the issues of the infrastructure and the logistics. It seems to us that we cannot digitalize our way out of the logistics puzzle, right? It's something that I think someone made a comment that people are opting to buy from other places outside of Africa than neighboring African countries. And it's not because we don't get good products over there. It's you buy, let's say, flowers from Kenya, and the flowers will have to go to the global north, find their way down, takes like 60 days. By then, the flowers would have withered, right? So it's easier to get it from the Netherlands. So issues around fulfillment centers, logistics, we can do the blockchain, smart contracting, we can do the, trying to track our goods. But unless we address those logistical and infrastructure issues, I feel like the e-commerce part of digital trade will still experience some problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, lady.
Thank you very much. My name is Nadira Bayat, and thank you very much, of course, to the excellent panelists for your insights and all the incredibly valuable information. So my question is on the environmental dimension of digital trade, and we've spoken about economic development and social inclusion, which are all incredibly important, but I just want to ask about the environmental dimension, because we know that digital has a footprint, an environmental footprint, and to ask the panelists what the thinking is about addressing the environmental implications of digital trade and how this is being addressed in African countries. Thanks.
Thank you very much. If anyone would like to, Michelle? Yeah.
Some really great comments there. I want to go back to what the first lady was saying around access and being able to connect even beyond to the global economy. I go back to my earlier point, my first address, when I was saying, at the end of the day, we are, of course, trying to encourage intra-African trade for sure. But when you look at businesses, and I'm an SME myself, I've started as an SME, right? So for me to grow my market or my access, I want to go beyond. By digital trade, I want to be able to access any market around the world, is basically what she was saying. So how do we ensure that even if I'm in the rural community, I'm in Pemba, I'm in Mazabuka, here I'm talking about Zambia, right? And I'm doing something, right? Can I do it on my mobile? Of course you can. And you can grow your market. It does not limit you, right? To say, I can only do it in Zambia, I can only do it in Kenya. So I think that's the power of digital. But what you were saying is very important, that we also need to educate those entrepreneurs who are in the rural. We need to connect them because they're not connected in the rural. We need to ensure that information that we're talking about here and information that's flowing on different platforms gets to them as well. I think is very, very important. And then your comments, the gentleman here who was talking about, moving goods from one point to the other in different markets and going from here to there. I was talking to the Secretary General of the Aviation for Africa, right? And we were saying something that we are working very hard on the rules and the policies again, because that is what is causing us to go from, one point to the other. And that is also causing us the people and the free movement of people. So up until we are integrated in all those different areas of rules and policies, we cannot shift, right? And because if we not shift, then we have these problems you're talking about. And no matter how fantastic your application, which is powered by AI and blockchain, how great it is, if you cannot, have a common policy understanding, then we still face these problems and issues. So there we need to integrate beyond just digital trade. We also need to look at the things, aviation, travel, transport, the whole range is what we need to look at. And I think the Secretariat, of course, is also looking at that. Finally, your point around digital technologies and the impact on the environment. What's happened today is actually counterproductive. I'll use Zambia as an example. We had major drought in Zambia, as people know, right, in this room. We had issues with electricity and access to electricity because of the challenges we had in the country. Now reverse that with technology and the usage of things like AI, which I have talked to the government here, right? If you can use this technology to predict that this is potentially going to happen, you can counter against that. And when it comes to the environment, actually, these technologies I'm talking about, they're new methodologies, designing these technologies or coding or writing the protocols that are actually beneficial to the environment. So you can use solar energy to mine cryptocurrency, for example, right? Which is less energy than today's electricity, normal electricity. So we are moving beyond, the normal traditional areas, and we're actually using new innovative models that are more energy efficient, right? And take into consideration the impact for the environment. And of course, now with things like AI and blockchain and all of that, we're using those technologies to also tell us what is going to happen. So we avoid the situation we had in Zambia this last year. Predictive analysis using technologies, right? And knowing that, okay, we're going to have the drought, then we'll bring in, help and support much earlier on so that we don't end up with a situation where we have the load shedding, which again, common to you guys in South Africa as well, right? So I just wanted to address that a little bit and give people some pointers there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Very brief.
Brief. Just on the first question, there is a WhatsApp community which is called Young E-Commerce in Africa, which if you give me your telephone number, or your WhatsApp number, I'll add you to it. Over 80 people there, representing over 25 countries. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I need to move to the last block that is about adopting the digital trade protocol. I'm basically thinking of not just basically complicate provisions, but basically creating an environment conducive to trade more, digitally trade more, and basically for expanding the digital economy in Africa. So now I would like now to basically bring Alastair to particularly something that was mentioned a few times, that is specifically, well, on finance and other enablers of that, and basically we can talk about fintech, origin of digital services, and the challenges of e-commerce. I mean, we have been talking about trust and consumer protection, but what would be other challenges, and particularly discuss all those technical barriers to digital trade?
Max, thank you very much indeed. I'll start with the last one first, and that is, well, first of all, I could say that each of those three questions should have a masterclass of its own. Can I please propose that? But starting with the last one, when the E-commerce Forum of Africa was created in 2020, we identified 12 different issues, 12 different areas where there was a need for working together in order to find solutions. The digital trade protocol has answered at least three of those. and that is customs facilitation, differing regulations, and also the payments system. But I'll come back to that in a moment. So creating a level playing field, if you like. But there are still a lot of other areas which do need and which have been touched here. Michel just talked about logistics and the problem of logistics. That's going to take ages to be solved, simply because it's trillions of dollars worth of money needs to be put into it. However, having said that, Michel also said that only 17% of Africa's trade is traded within Africa. If we can pivot that to be 80%, we will have the demand, which will create the money, which will create the logistics which are necessary. So let's think about that as a proposal or as a suggestion. The digital divide we've also talked about a lot. It remains a major stumbling block. Now, e-commerce depends on the digital connection. Without that, we can't operate. And it's not just a matter of connection, it's also a matter of interconnection. It's a bit weird. Well, it isn't, but I mean, it could be a bit weird if you like to think of it that way, that we don't have interconnection between different countries, that you can't walk outside Zambia and immediately find yourself in another mobile operator without paying large roaming charges. So these sorts of things really need to be solved. I know the African Free Trade Area is dealing with that. It's got a protocol draft, an agreement, a draft agreement on connection. I think it's very important. Turning to fintech, well, we need to see, let's say, much greater progress with the Pan-African Payments and Settlements System, PAPS, which was talked about earlier by Patchy. That will ease the use of national currencies between countries. There is also TCIB, which is in SADC, and there's also the one from COMESA, which has not quite started yet, as I understand it. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, that the central banks and the private banks are proving awfully obstinate when it comes to implementing PAPS, TCIB, or whatever. Why? Because they make money out of transactions as now spent. If you are transacting between Nigeria and Togo, which was the example that Patchy gave, and it takes a week to do, where do you think that money is sitting, making large amount of interest for the banks? Oh, sorry, I said for the banks. What a mistake. Whoops. So this is a big problem. The banks and the central banks who rely on the banks are being obstinate and given a good shake-up. There is going to be a shake-up in one way or another. We are going to see, I believe, a big change coming very soon, where the US dollar is losing trust every single day. There is a digital Chinese renminbi, yeah, which is already growing in a number of countries in Asia and Middle East. That could take over. But do we need another foreign currency to become the reserve global currency? No, we need an African one. And this is referred to in the digital trade protocol. And we should push for that, ladies and gentlemen, I think. Third issue, capacity building. We've talked about it a lot. Capacity building, and particularly training on e-commerce. What I find all the time is that governments tend to think that e-commerce is a license to print money. It isn't. It's a very difficult thing to do, it's made up of many different moving parts, and it needs training. So I appeal to all those online as well as here. Any trade association that deals with e-commerce, please contact us. We need to cooperate on training and training material. There's plenty of it. Now, finally, looking at the real disappointment, I must admit, the real disappointment in the digital trade protocol is Annex 1 on country of origin for services. So I've looked at country of origin for services all over the world, by region, by country, or whatever. I have not been able to find one full approach to it anywhere. And there is a good reason for that. There's a very good reason for it. And that is, it's very difficult to identify country of origin for services. Very, very difficult. It's easy to find out who makes these glasses. Is it made here? Is it made in China, wherever? For services, how do you identify what is a service and who owns that service? Is it the funder? And in that case, you immediately come up with some really big problems. So the issue of service is a country of origin of service is a very big problem. And it also poses the question, what will happen if you are not an African country, but you are still providing a service, an African product, sorry. What about Jamaica? Jamaica is not an African company. It's owned because it did an IPO in New York. It's owned by shareholders from around the world. We are, by that protocol, putting investment in a difficult situation, putting e-commerce in a difficult situation when it comes to investment. So that protocol we need to work with. We need to work to see how it is no fault of the Secretariat whatsoever. It's a fault of government ministers who didn't think, but just felt that it was a good idea somehow. Or perhaps they didn't think.
Thank you.
That's the end of my comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alistair, for basically going through all those specific points in relation to the protocol and basically what can be improved on that. And that is what brings me now to Michelle, because you have been always very, bringing the issue of AI and other emerging technologies. So basically, on top of what Alistair was saying of potentially what needs to be changed, what would be the sort of potential adaptations of the digital trade protocol specifically to these issues of AI particularly?
Yeah, thank you,
It
Max.
can be very brief.
I will try to be very, very brief. I know everybody's looking a bit tired as well. So no, I think, Alistair, based on what you were saying, you know my work when it comes to digital currencies, right? And working with the central banks and talking to them. So I won't go, we need another masterclass for that on its own, but we are working with PUBs, we're working with the central banks to find solutions where we're actually strengthening the African currency, right? And not necessarily depending on either the Chinese or we want to strengthen African financial ecosystem and African currency. That is one thing to say. And there's a lot more that's going to come on this, right? So we are working on it. And in fact, we're actually leveraging technology. Africa is doing it. Not other parts of the world. Africa is doing and leveraging technology to actually look at how do we strengthen our currency and how do we trade with each other using our own currency and not necessarily having to depend on the dollar. So I'll just say that on that. Now, on the protocol, in terms of how do you implement, yes, there's certain, it's back to my thing around interoperability and alignment, right? So when we talk about services, we talk about goods. How do we ensure that that digital trade protocol, like Alistair was saying, ensure that, how do I know that service is coming from an African group? How do we monitor and track? And I think this is where emerging technologies come in, actually. Because with technologies, with things like blockchain or smart contracts, you have provenance, what we call provenance. And this is where you track and trace where everything is coming from the source to the table, right? Whether you're talking about the banana and you're telling me, it's from, from Pemba, or it's from Kitwe, or it's from Ndola, right? How do I know that is coming from there? How do I know? You can use technology to monitor and track and actually watch the whole trail across the supply chain. So for me, the emerging technologies like AI, like blockchain, is going to play a fundamental role in actually authenticating, right? Authenticating both in services and both in goods, which is fundamental to what you were saying, Alisa, because how do we know today? You don't know today. But when you start to introduce the AIs, artificial intelligence, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, I know it's a buzzword right now. Everybody's excited. For me, it's old. AI is old. I've been in emerging tech since 2011. There's nothing new about it in my world. But in today's world where we are seeing many, many challenges, whether it's around food security, right? In Africa, why do we have food security issues in Africa when we produce and can produce the most food, right? Part of the problem is actually being able to monitor and track and also predict. AI is very good. It's a predictive tool, right? It tells you things that you do not know. It's superhuman ability to monitor and read data sets to tell you things that you should do to make things a little bit faster and better for you. So for me on AI specifically, we can't cover all the emerging technologies today. We have masterclasses that we do all the time, if you reach me. But on artificial intelligence specifically, that is going to transform every sector. Healthcare, agriculture, education, right? All of that is going to be a major part. And AI in particular, I think is going to play a major role for Africa specifically, especially in terms of how to integrate. How do we ensure, for example, mobile money interoperability? Because we use a lot of mobile money across the African. So how do we tap on AI, for example, to help us interoperate, right? So it's a tool that we can use to help us to do things better, predict, things like diseases, predict when do we plant our maize so that we can grow our maize and transport. How do we use AI, for example, for education? Different languages. We always speak different languages in Africa. How can we use the AI to, language modeling and all of that? So major opportunities, I think, with AI, and it's going to play a major role in terms of integrating us, and in fact, even delivering on the digital trade protocol and the AfCFTA itself.
Thank you very much. And we are reaching almost the end. So probably Prachi is going to discuss a few points about the 13 points, but very briefly. I mean, we are not going to go through all the points, that for sure. But I would like, in the meantime, to the panelists to think of a tweet. So basically, your last intervention would be very concise, something that you want to highlight of the whole masterclass in a tweet. So think in the meantime, Sally, who basically what you can say in 140 words in the old tweet. I'm going to do it. I mean, not in the 400 that you can do now. 140 words, very concise. What would be the high point you want to leave everyone of masterclass? Prachi.
Thanks, Max, and thanks, everybody. I think it's been very interesting and useful to build on everything I presented earlier. All of that has been spoken about and discussed extensively, even with the online audience and the audience here, the panelists themselves. So I think the implementation plan, which everybody has in their leaflets, page number 2, as well as online, you would have a link to it now. For some reason, the Wi-Fi connection is incredibly slow, so I can't share my screen and it keeps going on and off. So you can still see it, and I'll be talking about it. Yeah, and we talked about the implementation, what member countries should be doing initially. And as I said, that we have summarized it down to just 13 points. If every country follows these 13 points, I am quite positive that we are going to be able to implement the digital trade protocol across Africa. And I think it builds on everything that we've discussed. We need to review what we have in place and what the digital protocol is asking us to do, what is it requiring us to do, mandating us. There are different types of languages used in the digital trade protocol, and I think it's important to recognize that we need to find the gap between what the protocol wants and what we already have. Setting priorities on when should we fill these gaps? Should this be done in the medium term, in the short term, in the long term, in the next 6 months, next year, next 5 years, next 10 years? I think it's very important to understand that and very, categorize them very clearly. Setting these priorities would also mean taking feedback from everybody who's going to be involved in a digital economy, whether that's the public sector, the private sector, firms, women in youth, even the informal businesses, MSMEs, associations representing MSMEs specifically. And I know we talked about this, but I think it's very important to include them because they form, over 50% of all African trade is conducted by MSMEs. And I think it is so important to formalize them and include them in this process. And receiving feedback from private sector in general and including them in decision-making about them, I think is key. And we've been advising this to every government we've been working with on the digital trade protocol. And obviously it means also securing ministerial approval because we have to make sure that we have political impetus. We have to make sure it is actually going to be adopted. And that could lead to creation of a national digital trade policy. Most countries have trade policies in place, but they don't have a digital trade policy in place. So I think it's important to have a comprehensive policy document that highlights and brings everything together under one umbrella policy. Defining an implementation plan, defining who does what. So to ensure that there's no overlap in responsibility, ensure everyone understands, every ministry, every department, every association understands what they need to do to ensure implementation. I think that is important. A lot of times we get lost in who needs to do what, and I think it's important to navigate that as quickly as possible. And in the end, ensuring that we know how to measure implementation, and we talked about this in the presentation. There are lots of different indicators, macroeconomic, socioeconomic, and digital indicators that can be used to ensure we can track our implementation. And in addition to that, governments also need to define what progress looks like for them. So to define and to track that constantly, even if that includes publishing data to ensure transparency and maintaining stakeholder engagement throughout the process and even after, to constantly update the policies, constantly update what is happening in terms of implementation. And I think all of us already, I hope all of us are going back with this little sense of understanding, a more understanding on what we need to do and what role we need to play in the implementation, regardless of whether we come from the government, the civil society, or the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prachi. And the tweets. So, Sally, your 140 words that you want to leave the masterclass.
It's been very 140 words or characters. Well, all right. I mean, it's been very insightful. I mean, to sit down with various people from different countries, get also insights from colleagues here. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you've also gotten to get some insights from what we're doing in Nigeria. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Very brief, yeah.
Sure. I took liberty to actually write mine down. So digital trade is the magic key for Africa to lead the world and unlock Africa's economic growth, taking Africa to over a $30 trillion continent.
Okay, wrote mine down as well. We must embrace the use of digital technologies to aid the seamless movement of people, goods, services, funds, and information securely to accelerate the implementation of the digital trade protocol. Thank you.
In order to achieve understanding, a masterclass in every single country.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree with that. In every single country, probably a masterclass on every single of the topics that we have been discussing. So again, thank you very much to the panelists. A very good applause to all of them that they have traveled from to attending this and they shared their wisdom with us. Of course, to the audience, I mean, the one that is here physically and the one online. I mean, we have at some checked, we have almost like 70 people that were online attending. Now with you, it was about an event of around 100 people online and physically. Also, I would like to thank the AfCFTA Secretariat that basically sort of give us this space to actually sharing with you. And of course, to the FCDO that have supported this event and is supporting our work in ODI, supporting again the AfCFTA Secretariat and the country on the negotiations and the implementation of the AfCFTA. I would like to provide to the people here, the people online, that they can provide us with some feedback. I think that there is a QR code that you can use to provide us some comments. I mean, what you thought about this whole event. So the people online, there must be also a link that they can follow to provide the feedback. That is very important for us. That we know whether this has been of use for you, and what can have been improved or covered. As I said, maybe for future master classes in countries and specific topics, that would be very helpful. Also, don't keep checking at ODI website. I mean, for all the material, I think in the leaflet there are some QR codes to different publications and different material that we have been producing in relation to digital trade and specifically on the digital trade protocol. Again, thank you very much for your time. I hope that you have a very fruitful rest of the day in the other master classes, and of course, in tomorrow, tomorrow and the day after, the digital trade forum. Thank you very much. Yes, this closes the master class. Thank you.